Hi, thank you so much for joining me. My name is Keith Brooks. Today, the letter J stands for the Jirakusu snake, also known as the Fodame Nos Vamos Moher. The Jirakusu snake is one of the most deadly snakes in the entire world. Hailing from South America, it can be found in a lot of the coastal line. Most notably, the snake is seen in Brazil and northern Argentina. When young, or a snakelet, which is the name for a young snake, they're more arboreal, hiding in trees, most likely trying to avoid different types of predators. But as they get older, they become more terrestrial. However, this snake has a natural camouflage built into its color. That color can vary, whether it's dark brown against a yellow underbelly or a pattern of green. They tend to have dark arches across their backs, and where their scales meet often creates like an X-like shape. They have a flatter head, much like the vast majority of pit vipers. And when being terrestrial, they like to have something to cover them at all times, just so they can make it easier to hide. They can grow up to 7 feet long. Their fangs are roughly 2 centimeters, but one bite of this snake at full adulthood has the capacity to kill 16 people. The animal is ovoviviparous, meaning that it's sort of a combination of egg-laying creature and giving birth to a full-grown animal. The eggs are fertilized inside of the body of the female snake and are born in the process of hatching. Now, like a vast majority of reptiles, the female of the species is always bigger than the male. The Jirakusu snake is polyamorous, finding multiple mates, but like a lot of other animals, has the ability to store the sperm of their mate in their body for years on in order to ensure that they fertilize those eggs when it is most convenient and there are more resources to allocate. When they have snakelets, they have anywhere from 10 to like 15, and generally are on a pattern of having babies every other year. Within a lot of snakes, right before mating season kicks off, there's a lot of male-to-male conflict as they try to assert dominance, but in this snake, we really haven't seen that. Instead, the female is always sort of the boss. She's the bigger snake, she's sort of in charge. When juvenile, the snakes will feed almost entirely on frogs, with 75% of their diet consisting of webbed little guys. When they become adults, that sort of switches to about 80% rodents. Yet not all rodents are on the menu. The white-eared possum loves to eat these guys. Yet the defense mechanisms the snake has are very interesting. One, coil itself up together. You've seen tons of snakes doing this. And part of the reason is that it has a more advantageous striking position. But secondly, it's to keep its body tight so the predator has less to bite onto. Also, a vast majority of snakes, this one included, will thump their tail to give a vibration in order to warn the other animal, hoping to scare it away before a confrontation actually takes place. Jirakusu also takes the methodology of trying to extend its neck vertically as far as it can to make itself seem taller to scare the animal away. If all else fails, it can bite and, in addition to that, slap its body, sort of just hurling itself like Brian Pillman from the WCW. Now, the Jirakusu is an ambush hunter, meaning it generally lies in wait for its food, but there is a distinction between how the juveniles hunt and how the adults hunt. Juveniles have a lightly colored tip of their tail, something they will eventually grow out of, but while young, they utilize it to lure in prey. You see, that light tail kind of looks like a mealworm or like a grub or something, so what they'll do is they'll move the tail, luring the animal in, moving the tail against the dark colors of its body that already blend in until it finds the animal in a perfect place to strike. And adults have been observed to have 2 different methodologies of attacking. One for if they know a species, and the second if they don't know what the species is. If they know what the species is, they will just bite it, keep their fangs in, let the venom do its job, and then eat the animal. If they don't, they'll strike and then back away for a while, just sort of observing what happens and seeing if their venom is effective to this animal or not. And it is, because it's really fucking intense venom. Now, a single bite of the juvenile of the species emits 1,000 milligrams of the venom, which is enough to kill 10,136 rats. As the snakes develop, their venom becomes more potent, but when they're younger, they have more anticoagulating chemicals in their bite. Get older, that venom becomes much more effective. In a human, when bitten, it develops abscesses, hemorrhaging, necrosis of internal organs, and a failure of the circulatory and respiratory system. Most victims will go blind minutes before they die. The female of the species has more toxic venom than the males do, though the male venom specifically is more effective against human muscles. In captivity, we know these animals live about 6.5 years. We don't know how long they live in the wild. It is one of the most understudied animals in all of existence. However, one of the cool things that they have, like all pit vipers, is infrared sensors in between their eyes and nose. These things kind of look like nostrils, but what they actually do is they receive disruptions on the infrared wavelength and also heat signatures. It's like fucking Predator. They can tell that there's something over there, or they can smell the body heat you emit, and this helps them in the dense of jungles find their prey. They have vertical slits in their eyes like the vast majority of snakes. What this actually functions as is binocular vision. It allows them to fucking zoom in, which is crazy. And I know everything about this snake sounds terrifying, and it kind of is. However, in their venom, they have a specific peptide that when it comes into interaction with mammalian hosts, lowers blood pressure. In fact, this has been used to create enzyme inhibitors for humans to use to fight hypertension. And the research about that has barely begun. But their venom is so complicated, with so many different types of toxins functioning at the same time, each to have a different effect, that cracking that chemical structure can help us understand why these organs fall apart, or why our bodies react the way they do. I think the more we learn about these animals, the more empathy it will produce, and the more we'll be able to see past our own fears and conceptions and panics, the more we understand their behavior, the easier it is to turn off that part of our brain that just says fight or flight. Instead, figure out a different solution in this situation. I don't know. I think these guys are super interesting and compelling, and I never heard of them prior to doing this, even though I take hypertension medicine. So, it's pretty cool. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for joining day 11 of 100 Days of the Animal Kingdom. Bye, everybody. Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining. My name is Keith Brooks, and today the letter P stands for plecofish, also known as the medieval catfish. The plecofish is a type of animal that belongs in the family Loricariidae. Loricariidae is the largest family of catfish in the entire world, and they're all armored catfish. Now, all plecos are Loricariidae, but not all Loricariidae are plecofish. There are tons of fish that are armored, and there are tons of fish who are suckerfish who eat algae off of stuff. If it does both, it's a plecofish. Originally native to South and Central America, there are over 150 different species of plecofish alone. Really popular with aquarium enthusiasts, these animals go by all sorts of nicknames like algae eaters, suckerfish, janitor fish, super cool leviathan, beast of goodness. But they grow in very disproportionate sizes. Some remain small their entire life, and some will just keep growing and growing and growing. That's what she said. And often, because the fish's size defies the expectation of the owner, they will be released out into the wild, causing them to become invasive species for tons of different regions, whether it be Malaysia, the Philippines, Thailand, or America. They're a highly adaptable fish that across the board has armored skin called scutes that really acts like battle armor. Think about the density of your teeth. That same sort of density are the scales. Oftentimes they'll have very sharp dorsal fins, and they have the ability to latch on to things with their mouth. Not like by biting it, but like suction cupping it. Vast majority of plecofish are omnivorous. Some are herbivores, some are carnivores, and some actually just eat wood. Wood is like their diet, it's them and termites. Those are the guys. But the vast majority of plecofish are opportunistic eaters, meaning they'll eat whatever they can get their hands on. They really like algae. They really like, some of them really like crustaceans, like snails. Sometimes they'll even eat dead or dying fish. As far as diversity in its species, this one is kind of hard to beat because some plecofish exist only in shallow waters that are kind of murky. Think about, if you're in America, what you associate a catfish with, sometimes that same environment, like muddyish water, always fresh water. And then sometimes they exist deep within the depths of the water itself, truly becoming troglobites, which means animals who are void of sunlight, like a cave dweller. And all plecofish across the board love hiding in things. It's like their favorite pastime in the world. When mating, the male will dig, burrow, and tunnel out a cave for the female to go lay the eggs in. Once the eggs are hatching, the fry is what the fish are called, the male will take care of them. But also a reason they tend to like caves and anything they can get under or hide behind. They tend to be very shy creatures. In fact, there are very few examples of them actually breeding in captivity. They are one of the most widely domesticated fish out there in the entire world. Vast majority of pleco fish also have one other exceptionally cool ability, and that is to breathe air. Whereas most fish will use their gills to absorb the oxygen and all the nutrients it needs from the water, pleco fish will do the same thing, but they'll also be able to go up out of the water, grab some air, and store it in their stomach to use it to refuel their oxygen sources. Some Asian parts of the world where pleco fish have become an invasive species, they are known to be sold live out of the water, with some pleco fish being able to survive out of the water for up to 36 hours. Now, the common name pleco comes from one of the original scientific taxons that was attributed to a specific species, and that was Plecostomus plecostomus, which sounds like a cool fucking hocus pocus spell. Pleco is pleated, scoda means mouth, mus means under, so under the pleated mouth, I guess is kind of what it means. That animal has since been renamed, but Plecostomus shows up in a bunch of these different guys. This right here is the spotted Plecostomus, albino pleco, the chocolate pleco, the leopard pleco, the Amazonian sailfin pleco. And one of the hindrances of these fish being so popular is that sometimes delineating between species can be kind of difficult. So a lot of different plecos are often just called common pleco when they're not, when they are distinctive different species. And in fact, there is no common pleco. Now, this is the clown pleco, or the clown panache. And this is the guy we were talking about earlier that eats wood. He has all these different stripes on him, and they can change in color as he gets older. And we haven't really found out a reason why they changed the specific colors, but it's kind of neat. This is the Adonis pleco, and this is the Titanic pleco, both growing up to 40 inches long. This is the cactus pleco, and you can tell why, because he's covered in all these sort of spine stuff. In their native regions, they're often referred to as cascudos or acaris, but another naming structure they have, because we haven't really delved into the genetic testing to see what species are distinct and what are just subspecies, you'll often see a bunch of fish that belong to the family referred to by their L numbers. It'll be like L187, L964, or whatever. This is just a cataloging system that marine biologists use to identify, all right, so this specimen is this, and one day we'll sort of sort them out. Now, some of these fish have barbels, which are whiskers, right? And these whiskers act the same way a cat's whiskers do, really, to give it sort of a sensory idea of what's around it. The smallest pleco is the Nanoplecostomus eleonori, named after Brazilian marine biologist Eleonora Trajano. It's 2 centimeters long. The vast majority of plecos also have something called the omega iris. Actually, what it is the ability to control how much light their eyes intake. This is the coal pleco, and the coal pleco, as you can tell, has these long streamers coming from his fin that they can determine if a predator is approaching miles away in the water just by the change in the current. This guy's called the Papa Panache, and I just like his name, so you should look at him. This is a bristlenose pleco. The bristles on its nose actually grow as the fish grows. Males will have more bristles, and the female of the species will hardly have any. This is the zebra pleco. It is an endangered species. This is the gold nugget pleco, which has sexual dimorphism amongst the male and the females, as the males will have flatter heads. This is the royal pleco with a beautiful pattern, but there are about 6 different variations of how this pattern could present itself. We still don't know as of yet whether they are completely different species or just a subspecies of the royal pleco itself. This is the snowball pleco, who looks like he was in a snowball fight and lost. This is the rubber lip pleco, who begs you to reconsider the name because he just finds it offensive. And this is the leopard frog pleco with these beautiful rich colors. And notice how the fins, unlike any other pleco, all seem to be made out of separate ridges. The average pleco will live anywhere from 8 to 10 years, with some pleco being noted to live 25 years. But again, these numbers are entirely within captivity. We don't know that much about how they live in the wild. About a week prior to recording this, maybe 2 or 3 weeks prior to you viewing it, my pleco fish passed away. I know this is savvy. I had Junior for 8 years. I bought him at Walmart when Walmart was still selling fish. He was so tiny. I was sick, and someone had gifted me 2 rainbow sharks, and they needed a buddy. And so my buddy TJ and I went and got him. TJ said, oh, he's gonna be really tiny, but he'll just eat the algae and he'll clean up the tank. Junior, when he passed, was 27 inches long. He was massive. And he outlived his brothers, the rainbow sharks. And, we lived together in 4 or 5 different houses. He was coming with me everywhere I went. Beautiful coloration and just a gentle giant. I would sit and I would play guitar for him, and he would get closer to the glass wherever I was. Even if I moved to a different spot, he would go to that spot then to listen to me. And he really liked slow, like country twang music. He was very interesting, and he was just a sweet boy. Always shy, loved to hide. He looked terrifying. I have pit bulls, and he scared the shit out of the pit bulls just by looking at them. But he was just a big sweetie. Being sick, there were times when I didn't want to go on anymore, where I didn't think I had the strength to live through what I was going through. And I had, thankfully, pets that just them being in my life gave me comfort and gave me a reason to have to wake up, right? Taking care of another living creature and putting your love into somebody. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but I lost one of my best friends when I lost him. He was a sweet, wonderful companion. And again, I can tell you, these creatures, they're territorial against other of their same species. But as far as just a chill buddy to hang out with, a beautiful fish to watch it grow and expand into something absolutely stunning. I'm so blessed to have known him, so yeah. Thank you so much for tuning in. Day 12 of 100 Days of the Animal Kingdom. Hi everybody, thank you for tuning in. My name is Keith Brooks, and today the letter K stands for the knife-toothed dogfish, also known as the what did he just say? The knife-toothed dogfish is a rare shark located in the Atlantic Ocean near the coasts of Scotland and Spain and Portugal all the way down to Senegal, and recently also found in the Pacific Ocean near New Zealand. It is what's known as a sleeper shark, which doesn't mean that it's sleepy all the time, though it might be. We don't really know a lot about it. But a sleeper shark is used to describe a type of shark that has low activity and is perceived as non-aggressive. But in fact, most sharks are actually non-aggressive. They're just super curious animals. Oftentimes when we're thinking about the depiction of them, we're combining the ferocity of what their teeth look like and the fact that we're seeing them eat things. But I'm sure if a pig saw us eating barbecue, they would also probably call us monsters. Knife-toothed dogfish is a smaller shark with a black skin and a creepy, weird-looking blue eye and these sharp-edged knife teeth in its lower jaw. It has the ability to open its mouth super wide, and its bite has the same strength as any other shark's would, which is ferocious and terrifying. But in fact, its shorter snout allows it to get in closer to animals and more effectively have a lethal bite. They can grow to be about 3.5 feet long. The teeth on the top of their jaw are lance head. Teeth on the bottom of their jaw are triangular and sharp. So it's believed that the motion that the sharks use is to pin something down to its bottom teeth and then scrape it across, meaning that this shark has the ability to use its upper jaw not only to stretch wide and to bite, but also to pull while this bottom jaw pushes, which is just intense. Pectoral fins are thin. It has 2 dorsal fins, the second one being the largest one, and its tail fin is asymmetrical, allowing it the opportunity to maneuver rather quickly in a short amount of distance. It's believed that these animals are ovoviviparous like other sleeper sharks, but to be honest, we don't really know a lot about them. Up until 2016, we thought they were only in the Atlantic, but now to discover that they're in the Pacific is kind of mind-boggling. That being said, we have no idea how long these animals live. We don't know anything about their litters. We know nothing about their mating system. We know almost nothing about their lives. Yet it's estimated these sharks are older than humans. And I know this is a short episode today, but I think it's kind of important to point out that there is so much in our world that we don't understand. This guy looks terrifying, but if I told you he's non-aggressive, it makes us and forces us to try to reconfigure everything we fathom about him, right? I used to have 2 rainbow sharks, which are not really this kind of shark, though they thought they were. And it made me super interested in sharks just in general. They're such an underappreciated and misunderstood and vilified animal for no good reason. One of the compelling things about them is just how little we know. They found a way to stay isolated and secretive, with humanity breaming around every corner, yet they find a way to keep to themselves. Now, the knife-toothed dogfish is known to lurk deep in waters. Thus, you can see some of its adaptations, the dark skin blending in with the water there, the eye made for seeing through the murky. It's a beautiful, compelling creature that from an evolutionary standpoint is perfect for its job. And hopefully one day we'll be able to study these guys more. I think part of the purpose of the series is to, try to share new information that I've learned with you, but also keep a catalog of things I want to know more about. Thank you so much for tuning in. Day 13 of 100 Days of the Animal Kingdom. Bye, everybody. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Keith Brooks, and today the letter L stands for the lacewing, also known as the serial killer of aphids. The lacewing is a member of the family Chrysopidae, which is a large insect family, further within the order of Neuroptera. There are about 85 genera of these insects, with ranging anywhere from 1,300 to 2,000 distinct different species. Found mostly in North America and Europe, they can also be spotted in South and Central America, and as adults, they're very fragile little insects. Their wingspan can be anywhere from 6 to 65 millimeters, the largest being those insects found within the tropical regions. Often get the nickname stinkfly. Now, while the word stinkfly actually does refer to one specific species, it is a trait that almost all of the species share, where they emit a specific foul odor when you handle them. They will generally be a green or brown color, with most of the species having compound eyes that give off a goldish hue, which is just really beautiful to look at. Their wings are semi-translucent, but they have a certain iridescence about them. Sounds like I'm trying to pick them up in a bar. Yeah, bug, you got a certain iridescence, baby, that I really like. The tips of their wings, they have an organ that's similar to our ears. So they hear from the tops of their wings, which is kind of crazy. And this hearing is estimated to be 1,000,000 times better than ours. Since they are kind of tiny bugs, they're often preyed on by bats. So they use these little wing ears to listen for a bat's echolocation squeal. When it hears it, the insect is known to bring its wings in and dive down, not only making itself smaller to make its echolocation signal tinier and less noticeable, but also to find a place to hide. While they don't actually emit noises, they do emit specific vibrations. Now, they use these vibrations, or these songs as we call them, mainly in their mating rituals, but it also helps to distinguish species from species. I don't have such a hard time saying the word species. Whereas in one species of the insect, let's say the green lacewing, won't understand the song emitted by the brown lacewing, like they're singing 2 different languages. The vast majority of these animals are either crepuscular or nocturnal, meaning they either operate in dusk and dawn or exclusively at night. Now, they feed on a wide range of things, from nectars to plants to any sort of berries to mites, termites, and mostly when they're young, they feed on aphids. Lacewing has 4 distinct stages of its life. First being an egg, the second being the woven pupae larvae stage, the second being the wingless immature adult, and the fourth being the mature winged adult. I fall in that category. The lifespan of the species is about 60 days, so multiple generations are had in one singular year. From egg to adulthood is about 27 days, and then from adulthood till death is roughly 20 to 40 days. Now, the female of the species will often have anywhere from 100 to 600 eggs that they lay, and normally these eggs are laid on the underside of leaves where they're hidden. The eggs generally will have stems, so they'll look like some sort of organic plant growth. Once entering the larval stage, they have a humpback and like weird bristle things on their thorax, and sort of the way the larvae hunt is by stumbling around blindly, knocking into things, and then just grabbing it and eating it, which is kind of fucking terrifying. But the bristles also act in a strange way, because what happens is they'll have leftovers and all of that stuff in their food, but often, since their favorite treat at this stage in their life is aphids, those little insects that feed on your plants, they'll have the husks of these bugs still in their like beard kind of thing, right? And they'll use this as camouflage against birds, because aphids typically are colored the same color as the plants that they're feasting on. It will use that animal's evolution to benefit itself, which is insane. Then it will go into a silken cocoon and then emerge as an adult. If it's a later generation within a year, they're often referred to as the lucky generation because they overwinter in the cocoon, meaning they don't have to deal with the shortage of food and all that stuff that the other insects have to. Now, the adult lacewing has a symbiotic yeast in its stomach. While the yeast feeds off of the animal's insides, it also gives it the ability to break down harder exoskeletons of any aphids that the animal might eat. Now, let's go back to the scary ass larvae for a second, because these guys are super aggressive. In fact, they've been known to bite humans, and the way they devour and just demolish aphids has lent them the name of aphid lions and aphid wolves. These animals are so good at exterminating aphids that oftentimes you can buy them as a pest control. Gardeners all over the world ship in lacewings as eggs and plant them in their garden to protect all of their flowering plants. On the larvae, you can notice these massive jaws, and that's again because they are ruthless killing machines. And just as they get older, though their appetite for aphids decreases, they still have the potential to just fucking annihilate them. You see, the lacewing's jaws are hollow, and what happens as it bites into an insect is it injects it with a chemical enzyme that melts the bugs from the inside, allowing them to just dine on mushy parts that, again, that yeast helps them break down even further. It's an insane process. When I started looking up a lacewing, I thought it was going to be, oh, this is going to be nice. He's going to like be super cool and pretty, and fucking Jesus. This is Ed Gein as a bug. On summer nights, if you live in North America, you'll often see these animals attracted to lights. Like most insects, they see it as a source of warmth and just want to go to it. Or they're like, oh, do they have a party over there? Wing, 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 flap, flap, flap. Let me go see what's going on. Wing, 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 flap, 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 flap. I'm sorry, do you have any aphids to snack on? Wing, wing, flap, flap, flap. All of my animals have speech impediments in my mind. I've always seen these guys, but I never really thought about what their name is or how complicated their life structure is. It's incredible to think that as you walk around the world, there are these insanely complicated, highly evolved species all around us that we don't even understand the workings of their societal structures. You always think like tarantulas are scary. It's a fucking true crime podcast in the making, but also really beautiful. Those are the ones that get you, man. They're like, come on, date me, Keith. I'm so pretty. Look at my wingspan. And then they melt you from the inside. Thank you so much for tuning in. Day 14 of 100 Days of the Animal Kingdom. Bye, everybody. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Keith Brooks. Today, the letter M stands for the Madagascar Red Owl, also known as the why wasn't this guy in the movies? The Madagascar Red Owl, also known as the Grass Owl, the Madagascar Grass Owl, the Scromanges Owl, I don't know how to say that one, is an African owl that can only be found on the island nation of Madagascar. First discovered in the late 1800s, it was believed to be extinct all the way up until it was rediscovered in 1993. Initially believed to only occupy the eastern side of the island, now we believe it's all over the island, just a hide-and-seek champion. In addition to that, it's an understudied animal that is vulnerable due to loss of its habitat, as the island of Madagascar is further and further developed every single year. It bears a lot in common with what we believe is a distant cousin in the cosmopolitan barn owl, though this animal is distinctly different. It's smaller. It's probably anywhere from 20 to 35 centimeters. This is one of the things I hate about doing research for shows like these, is I'm an American, so we measure things by either inches or Arnold Schwarzenegger biceps. So anytime like I see a measurement in like centimeters, it's it's in Korean now, because I was never just really taught that. So I'm like, okay, please let there be a translation later. And it, so I just never have. I'm already not good with measurements to begin with. I'm more of a theater major type of kid. With a red and orangish plumage, a pale face disc, grayish feet, and a grayish beak, it lives in evergreen forest, dry deciduous forest, secondary forests that have been altered by man, shrubbery, discarded debris, caves. This guy just wants to find any place that he can hide. Its diet mainly consists of native species from Madagascar, as opposed to the barn owl, which tries to go for more outsider species from its actual area of resting. And we can tell a lot by its diet based on owl pellets. So what an owl pellet is when an owl eats something and there's parts of the animal it can't process, basically throws up a hairball, right? And that hairball consists of bones and cartilage, and we can sort of dissect that and see what the owls are eating. So this guy eats a lot of small mammals, a lot of bugs, mostly rodent-like creatures that are native to Madagascar, except for the black rat, which is not native to Madagascar, but has been brought in by outsiders. Like the barn owl, it does emit a high screeching hiss sound, but unlike the barn owl, its hissing sound ends on a low note as opposed to a higher note. It also makes the sound every time it leaves its nest and every time it comes back to its nest, sort of like its own yeet sound that it makes. It also acknowledges other owls as it flies in the night, communicating with them through vocalizations, and even makes a wop 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 noise that serves as an alarm warning of something. They tend to have their nests and their roosts in elevated locations, generally being at least 3.9 meters off the ground. So we're talking about trees that have coverage, rocks, cliffs, but all of them tend to be on the outskirts of the forest line. It has never been reported to find a Madagascar red owl actually nesting within the canopy of a forest. And it's believed that the vast majority of this, being on the cusp of one territorial region to another, serves good for them because it's where most of their food likes to hunt. Here, in the places where the forest and the rice fields kind of blend, you'll find an abundant number of rodents, which these owls love to feed on. In captivity, they'll also eat other animals like frogs and stuff like that, but in the wild, we've determined they prefer mammalian sources of food. Now, when it comes to mating, we don't know a lot about this animal. In fact, we've only found one Madagascar red owl nest ever. They don't mate in captivity. They're just not reproducing. And the only nest that we've ever found tends to lean to the idea that these guys don't make their own nests. Instead, they like to find already cavernous trees, caves, any sort of hidey cub that was used by a previous animal, something like that, go in there and hatch their eggs. Our estimation is that these owls breed with 2 eggs at a time. And as the owlet is born, it spends roughly 4 months with its parent, learning how to hunt and all of that stuff. They are nocturnal creatures. Most scientists believe that they are similar enough to the barn owl that we can make some comparisons and assumptions about what the mating rituals are like. In barn owls, the mating process involves races, where the male will start a race and the female will try to catch up. Depending on how fast the female is, the male will then choose whether or not to mate with her. In the process of racing around, the male is also showing the female all these potential spots to store their eggs and to have their nest. The babies are born with soft gray downy-ish feathers and with their eyes closed. But as these owlets or chicks develop, they start to look more like their parents. That in-between region we don't really know that much about because, again, we don't know a lot about these animals. The conservative estimate is that within the island nation of Madagascar, there are anywhere from 3,000 to 15,000 of these birds, but we don't really know how accurate that number is, and I couldn't really figure out how that number was determined. For over a century, we thought these guys were gone. From 1879 to 1993, we didn't see any of them. There was no reported sightings, at least in the Western world. And from 1993 to 2007, we thought they only occupied one side of the island. So little is known about this animal that they might actually open up Dollar Generals in the middle of Madagascar, and we don't even know about it. That being said, it's hard for me to tell you about its nature, whether it's aggressive, whether it's gentle, any of that thing, because there's just not a lot of info I have. But I can tell you one thing, it's beautiful. Look, I'm kind of low-key scared of birds just because they are so foreign to the things I've cared for in my life, as far as like animals and stuff like that. I've had pets that are mammalian and fish. That's sort of it. And I've hung out with a bunch of lizards, but that, I don't need to talk about my work friends like that. Wah-ha-ha-ha. But there is something about us that feels separated when an animal's behavior feels so alien from those things that we're used to. And that can be a barrier. And I recognize that as a bias that I have within my own life, and I'm trying my hardest to rectify it. Whether it be birds, aquatic creatures, insects, arachnids, recognizing that just because it's different does not mean it's bad, but seeing beauty in that difference. I think it's a lesson we all can learn, Thank you so much for joining day 15 of 100 Days of the Animal Kingdom. Bye, everybody. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Keith Brooks, and today the letter N stands for the neglected frog, also known as the why did you call him that? I'm gonna cry. The neglected frog is a small species of frog endemic to Australia. Only exists in North Queensland, and right now specifically only on the 2 highest peaks within North Queensland itself. It's often referred to as the neglected nursery frog or the Bellenden Cur nursery frog, but that's probably like a bellend in cur. There's probably some sort of joke there that I don't understand because I'm not Aussie. But they are super tiny frogs with some dispute about how big they actually are. During my research, I found a lot of sites will say 3 centimeters is how long they get, but on all of the endemic to Australia research papers I found, it describes the frog as being 3 millimeters. So that's a vast difference, because 3 centimeters would be 30 of the other version. I tend to think it's the latter. I tend to think they're really, really tiny frogs. They weigh 1 gram, often less than 1 gram. The male of the species generally is about 2.5 millimeters if we're going with that route. The female, like many amphibians, is larger than the male at about 3 millimeters from snout to vent. That means from nose to butt, because frog butts are called vents. Remember that. They tend to be brownish orange in color, often with different sort of colorations and molting spots. On the underside tends to be either orange or yellow, and they have non-webbed fingers, each one of their fingers and toes having a distinct little pad on it, and their index finger, or what we would call their index finger, is always smaller and shorter than the rest of their fingers. They live at the 2 highest peaks of North Queensland, but still within a tropical area, always being found under some sort of shrubbery, leaves, that type of stuff. Now, we don't know an extensive amount about these frogs, but what we do know is that when they mate, they will lay a clutch of eggs. Clutch just means a group of eggs, anywhere from 10 to 20. But unlike other frogs, their babies do not have to be in water to be born. Instead, they look for moist dirt or rotted vegetation to deposit the eggs in and then cover them up with things so nobody can find them. The baby frogs go through the entire tadpole phase inside of the egg, never emerging until they are fully formed froglets, which is just a young little froggy. Like a lot of other frogs, they make a plethora of sounds. Generally, both the male and females can emit what kind of sounds like a little fart noise. The males specifically have a buzzing sound that they can emit, and like almost all frogs, dogs, and squirrels, if threatened, they will bark. But here's the cute thing. These guys like to hide under leaves. So sometimes as you're walking, if you get too close, this small 2 millimeter frog will just bark at you from under a leaf, telling you to leave it alone, which is just the most fucking adorable thing I've ever heard in my life. We don't really know how long these guys live. It's estimated at least 14 years. The idea that a generational span of the species is roughly 10 years. We don't know how long maturation exactly takes, but we do know that most of the eggs take roughly 28 days before they hatch. I don't really know why it's called the neglected frog. Probably because it's often overlooked, because it is a tiny animal, and because it is critically endangered. And there are a multitude of reasons for that. One, wild boar are in the area, and wild boar can be very destructive, unintentionally crushing or snacking on these guys. Also, one of the biggest predators is something called the yellow crazy ant. However, the biggest threat to these frogs, as most animals, is man. And it's not necessarily because man is encroaching on the environment by building apartments and flats and all of that stuff, but it's something much more modern of a problem. 20 years ago, these frogs were found all over North Queensland at many different elevations and sea levels. Now they are confined to only one specific elevation at the two highest points in that entire state. One of the biggest reasonings for this is the change in climate. We always talk about how long it will take before climate change completely alters human life, but we're only thinking about that alteration on a human scale. Other animals are already dealing with the effects every day, and for the smaller animals that depend on specific climates in order to survive, they're seeing drastic and radical changes within a single generation. The other issue about what's critically endangering these animals is that these frogs live in nature preserves that are allowed to be visited by humans. It's kind of an interesting dilemma is that oftentimes we will separate a piece of land in order to ensure its survival and try to maintain the beauty and the ecosystem therein. But in the process of doing that, in visiting it and making trails, leaving our trash, and even if you're not a disrespectful visitor, but just simply a person that loves nature, we can still find ourselves destroying these animals' habitats. Biggest threat for this animal, and unfortunately the vast majority of the animals that we will discuss in this series, or the way humans treat the earth. I think there has to be a delineation between the nature that we preserve for the nature's sake and the nature we preserve for our own enjoyment, and understanding how to better take care of the world around us, even if that means extracting ourselves from that equation. I mean, for the sake of these animals, for the sake of any animal, for the sake of the plant life, we have an impact that we're not always fully aware of. Thank you so much for tuning in. Day 16 of 100 Days of the Animal Kingdom. Hi everybody, my name is Keith Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me, and today the letter O stands for the Okapi, also known as an Animorph who couldn't quite make his mind up what he wanted to change into. This bizarre but adorable looking creature is also known as the zebra giraffe, the Congolese giraffe, or the forest giraffe. And at first glance, it might seem completely foreign to you. Kind of looks like a cow, deer, horse, zebra leg thing? I don't know. But surprisingly, it's not related to any of those animals. In fact, it is a type of giraffe. Throughout Earth's history, there have been hundreds of different species which would have belonged to the family of giraffe, but now in the year 2023, we have only two extant species left, the giraffe that we know and this guy. Found only in the Democratic Republic of Congo, it is a critically endangered species that, unlike its cousin the giraffe, stands at only about 4'11" to its shoulder. It's about 8 feet long and about 500 pounds. Though the female of the species actually is a little bit taller and a little bit heavier. But I'm not judging. Queen, you look beautiful. But that's not the end of the sexual dimorphism amongst these species. The male Okapia will have ossicones, which are the cones that giraffes have, the little horns they have on their head, while the female instead will just have like whirly hair bits. And the females will often have a redder hue. However, truth be told, the fur of these animals, not the legs, though we'll talk about that momentarily, is actually closer to a shade of purple, but it's all the fur combining to give it the specific color that we're seeing now. Key evolutionary trait that these animals have, though, is that their skin produces this oily filament that covers their body. Not only does it help them stay cool, it also allows them not to get caught on plants, keeps a lot of bugs off of them. Zookeepers around the world say that these little guys love neck scratches, but after you scratch one of their necks, your hand will feel like you've put it in a vat full of olive oil. They are herbivores who love different types of green plants, roots, trees, but they also really like to eat clay because it provides a certain salt and nutrients that their body needs. They also reportedly love the taste of burnt wood and bat guano, which is gross. That's my thought about that. They have 18-inch long tongues, making them the Gene Simmons of the giraffe family. And these tongues are normally black or bluish in hue and prehensile, meaning You know what prehensile means. The fucking tongue is like an additional arm for these guys. Generally solitary animals, they are often seen alone, but can come together in breeding season. Normally in the wild, they'll have a staked out land that they consider their own. Males will not tolerate other males coming into their territory, though they will allow females to come into their territory. When the males confront each other, they normally just fight by hitting each other with their necks. The female okapi will carry the baby for about 450 days before giving birth. The young calf will eventually grow into its coloration, but will be able to walk 30 minutes after birth. Now that coloration on their legs, the zebra stripe that we recognize, surprisingly they're not related to zebra or zebra depending on what part of the world you're from in any capacity. Now where zebra generally like to graze in open areas, these guys like to hide in the forest. So the leg markings help them camouflage themselves against the shadow and the light that plays within the canopy. However, they also serve a secondary purpose. These are often called follow me lines. Every single animal has a unique pattern on its hindquarters. When the young are born, they memorize that pattern. So when they're in the woods, they look for their mom and dad by looking at their legs. Now this animal has a rich history that we don't really know a lot about. It's called a living fossil not only because this creature sort of reflects a bygone era of mammals, but also has existed longer than mankind. But the West only learned about it in roughly 1901. In the 5th century BCE, the Ethiopian kingdom gave the Achaemenid kingdom a carving as a gift of this animal. Henry Morton Stanley in 1887 wrote about this guy, but referred to it as an African unicorn or an ati, which was the local word used for it. It's only in 1901 when the British Special Commissioner of Uganda, Harry Johnston, which sounds like I'm making a dick joke, came to the aid of a few members of a pygmy tribe that were almost kidnapped by some circus promoters. Pygmy often is used now as an insult, but it still is a group of about 3 tribes in Africa that are reportedly of smaller stature. As a thank you, they gave Johnston a skull of one of the animals and the pelt of one of the animals, because they knew that Westerners had never seen the animal. Johnston took this to the proper scientific authorities, and the animal was scientifically named the Okapi johnstoni after him. And the first part, Okapi, either comes from the Imbubu word Okapi, which is what they call the animal, or the Lesekara word Okapi. The animal, much like the giraffe, has something called a pacing gait, where most animals who move on 4s will move the opposite legs at the same time. So this guy and this guy will move, good, and then this guy and this guy will move. Giraffes and okapi move the same legs on the same side at the same time. Okapi have wonderful, amazing night vision, but they are diurnal creatures. They're most active in that dawn and dusk time period. Males will mark their territory by urination. Females live more sedentary lives, but use common defecation sites. Now, as far as vocalizations do, the animals do chuff, but that's mainly something the males do. They, I'm comfortable saying it, moan, but that's something only the females do during courtship, and they also bleat, but that's something the children do when they're wanting attention from their parents. We've recently found out that in addition to these sounds, the okapi also release low rumbling sounds that are below the spectrum of human hearing. Now, what these sounds are used for, we don't really know, but it is a form of communication from animal to animal. They also have something called the Fleming's response, which is like the same thing horses do when they like lift their lips and stuff. My teeth are gross, but you get the idea. Leopards are their number one predator in the wild, but the number one cause of their death in general is obviously humanity. In addition to people poaching them for their hides, illegal mining sites will often clear out areas of animal wildlife, but international efforts and organizations in the past few years have sought to compete against this and try to preserve and increase the animals' numbers. It's said that in the past 25 years, the number of okapi in the world has reduced by 50%. There are some in captivity though, and they are supposedly beautiful, kind, shy creatures that all the zookeepers absolutely love and adore. They say the breeding system of the okapi starts by smelling, circling, then licking each other. Then the male will throw its neck up and then put one leg out to show how fancy it is. Said that one of the most beautiful things about the Okapi cow is that they're born with really long eyelashes, just make them look absolutely beautiful, with these long manes and long white hairs sticking out of their legs. And it's just a stunning creature to look at, one that I didn't even know existed until the other day. Like, I'm randomly just going by letters. Like, I need a mammal that starts with O, I need a reptile that starts with a Q, blah, blah, blah. And especially, like, you know, I just look at a list and one animal sort of like captures my attention just from the name. And this, I was like, I have no idea what this could be. And then clicking on it, it's just mesmerizing how beautiful and unexpected this guy is, right? One of my favorite sensations is being surprised in a good way. Don't, like, sue me. Just being surprised constantly that the world has more to offer, or that it's bigger than you expected. You know what I mean? Thank you so much for tuning in. Day 17 of 100 Days of the Animal Kingdom. Bye, everybody. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Keith Brooks, and today the letter P stands for Pitbull, also known as God's Fart Factory. Now, let's start off with the most shocking news in the world. First of all, Pitbull is not a breed of dog. Instead, it is a group of types of dogs that include such wide range as the American Pit Bull Terrier, the American Staffordshire Terrier, the American Staffordshire, the Staffordshire Terrier, and often the American Bulldog, depending on what part of the world you're in. This lineage of dogs came from England in the 1800s, where they were bred specifically for a purpose that we'll get to momentarily. But this crazy mad scientist effort of eugenics took the idea of a bulldog and a brown and tan terrier and combined them to form this wide family of dogs. The bulldog part of the animal actually dates back all the way to ancient Greece with a dog called the Molosser. Initially, when the breeding programs started in England, they were for the purpose of blood sports, whether it be dog-on-dog fights, something called rat baiting, or even for punishment of prisoners. The idea was that the bulldog was too big for fighting, the brown and tan terrier was too small, so if they could perfectly breed the two, they would find a dog that was both agile and strong. And this is what they came up with, or at least a wide variety of those. Yet in the 1870s, blood sports were starting to become a little faux pas in England, so the dog, originally called the British Pit Bull Terrier, made its way to the United States. Blood sports were very popular in the States at the time and would remain so for a long, long time. Though some states started outlawing them in 1874, it wouldn't be until 2007 that the entire country outlawed dogfighting. While some, especially the males, were often used for dogfighting, others, specifically females, became something called nanny dogs. Now, pit bulls weren't the only nanny dogs, but they were often seen as such loyal and protective creatures and had such an affinity for humans that one would be given to a child at a young age, and that would be sort of their protector. In addition to that, they often became farm dogs as well. There exist these things called kennel clubs. And kennel clubs are all about recognizing breeds for their purebred status and stuff like that. I think they're kind of dumb as fuck, to be honest. But because of the association with dogfighting, in the early 1900s, they wouldn't recognize the pit bull. And other countries all over the world, including England, which had actually created the pit bull, started demonizing the animal and the practice of dogfights. Part of the way of doing this was calling them American pit bulls. Internationally, even though the dog's origins lie in Europe, the dog became known as an American breed. And so in the 30s, when these kennel clubs wanted to have a dog that was uniquely American, but wanted to distance themselves from the pit bull, they invented the new name that a lot of people use now, the Staffordshire Terrier. Now, a lot of countries in the world have outlawed this animal because its perceived violence and attack rate. A myth is that they have locking jaws, that when they bite onto something, it's almost impossible to break that because there's a locking mechanism within their mouth that prevents their jaws from opening back up. That's completely fabricated. None of that's real. In fact, it's not physiology that allows the pit bull to bite so hard. It's just determination. Have a psychological need to please people and to do a job completely. Not only does it sink its canines in, but it also presses hard enough to put its molars into the skin. But the lethal part about that comes afterwards is the shake that happens. It's just an evolutionary aspect of what they were bred to do, is to defeat their opponent, whatever it is. And so you'll see this if they're fighting something, or if they're destroying a chew toy, or my favorite pillow, anything like that. But it's important to note that the high quantity of pit bull dog bites reported from the United States that give people such cautionary ideas come from two different places. One, the abundance of pit bulls in the United States. It is one of the most prolific animals that we have in the entire country. Whereas opposed to somewhere like Canada, where the leading dog that causes injuries to people is a sled dog. It's just about the population of the canine within the region. And the second important factor to remember is that many times a mixed breed dog will be misidentified as a pit bull. A recent study found that more dog bites actually occur from small breed dogs, but it's just the severity of the dog bite from larger breed dogs that requires hospitalization or doctor's visits, thus tainting, contaminating, and skewing the reporting numbers. The dog that actually causes more bites to humans is the German Shepherd. But let's remember, a vast majority of German Shepherds were trained to attack people. People that have pit bulls or German Shepherds or Rottweilers or any of these large dogs that take care of these animals report them to be kind, loving, and patient creatures. In fact, on temperament tests, the pit bull is the second best dog you can have, with the best temperament of any animal coming from the golden retriever, the worst temperament of any canine coming from the Chihuahua. It seems to be that the bad reputation originally started from man's use of this animal, and numbers not being given with context have painted this negative image of what this dog is. But I have 2 pit bulls, and in fact, let's go to Keith Brooks live for an interview with said pit bulls. Here I am with 2 pup dogs. This is Nellie Brooks. And this is her sister Ninja Brooks. Now, you're both pit bulls. How does it feel to be a pit bull? Oh, you have more to say, ma'am? Thank you so much for your insights. Ellie and Ninja are both rescues, and you never know exactly what the lives they had before getting them were. Nellie was rough off. When my ex and I first got her, she had mange and she had cigarettes put out on her. You could see burns, and she still has some scars and stuff like that. But now they are the single most loving dogs I've ever met in my life. My dogs get upset if we don't go to bed at the right time, and will just cry to go to sleep. But I have to be in bed with them so I can cuddle. That's who they are. They love Ritz crackers. They love snacks. They get excited if they see another dog outside. They just cry and want to play with them because it's a friend. I think they're princesses. My dogs don't like to go outside if it's raining because they don't want to get their paws wet. I do think there is so much to be said about nurture versus nature, and about how you raise these animals and how you treat them. Even with Nellie, she has some aggression issues, but it's not actually aggression. It's about how she expresses her interest in you. She never got the chance to be a puppy, so she never got the chance to socialize. So she doesn't understand the appropriate social cues. So if you don't know her and she doesn't know you yet and she's trying to figure out, she might bark at you or she might get up in your face, but she's not trying to bite you. She's trying to kiss you. She's trying to smell you, all of that sort of stuff. But again, I understand if you're not familiar with dogs, that might frighten you. But again, it's just her way of communicating. I am for them a table. I'm a wrestling ring. They love to play, and they play like dogs. They fight. They play fight, and they have a great time. They absolutely adore doing it. But I totally see how they are, misunderstood from people who see them on the street. Ninja has never met a creature she didn't like in her entire life. When we go to dog parks, she is really interested in dogs. She's more interested in people. She wants to see every person and try to get adopted by all of them. I don't know. She doesn't like her life here, I guess. And Nellie, has some issues meeting other animals, but likes people infinitely. And I think that's a common trait amongst the animal. And it's weird because I think nurturing plays such an important part of it. But I do think understanding the nature of the breed and what was bred into them, because in these breeding processes that create these animals, there are specific traits that they're looking for to keep replicating. And that love of humans is a big one. Most pit bulls who have been treated kindly or have been treated moderately well love people. 16% of registered owners of canines report having a pit bull. Pit bulls make up 90% of all animal shelters, and they are the single most euthanized animal in the entire world. People take the sound bites that they've heard and they run with it and extrapolate. And the wonder is, right now, so many different organizations are fighting for pit bulls and fighting for changing the image of these animals. And so much work is still to be done, but thank God it is being done, because I can't see how anyone would look at them and mistake them for monsters. Thank you so much for tuning in. Day 18 of 100 Days of the Animal Kingdom. Bye, everybody. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Keith Brooks, and today the letter P stands for Pleska's Race Runner, also known as the Striped Small Speedy Boy. Pleska's Race Runner is a type of lizard found and native to Azerbaijan, Armenia, Iran, and Turkey. It is an oviparous lizard, meaning it has eggs found in the desert of those regions. A race runner, which is a specific type of lizard noted for how fast they run, and a couple of other cool things that we'll talk about later. This little guy can reach speeds of 17 miles per hour. Named after Russian zoologist Fredo Dmitryevich Pleski, it is a critically endangered species that not a lot of information is known about. Primarily feeds on insects and is super shy. Almost all race runners are. They don't like to be around people, and anytime they're startled, they move quickly to find somewhere to hide and to cover themselves. The area that this guy occupies is dwindling, not only because of climate change, but also encroaching human habitation. Now, I referred to this guy as a race runner, which is a type of lizard. There are roughly 60 species of race runners, also known as whiptails, and all of them have a couple of things in common. One is that they taste the chemical components of the air by flicking out their tongue quickly. They also have a secondary organ called a Jacobson's organ that helps them distinguish what those chemical compounds they are tasting are, distinguishing prey from predator from like a cactus. Perhaps more importantly, and one of the most vital reasons that we keep these animals alive is because of the genetic structure. Rather than having 2 sets of chromosomes, these guys will have 3 or 4 sets of chromosomes. But even more stunning beyond that is that they are parthenogenetic, or at least can be. Now, what does that mean? Well, the vast majority of race runners will have eggs the traditional way, having them fertilized, but examples of the species can reproduce without the presence of a mate. Self-reproduction. That's what being parthenogenetic is. Being able to reproduce all by yourself. But not to get Spider-Man evil villain logic here, but if we could potentially uncover why that occurs and how that occurs on a deeper molecular level, it could provide a cure for infertility. Even without that, what an amazing quality to find in a species of animal. The more I do this, the more I realize that like all these animals out there are basically fucking X-Men, because they have powers that are so different than what we assume life has to be like. Again, there's not a lot of information about this guy specifically, but you should know he exists because he's super cool, and so are you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Day 19 of 100 Days of the Animal Kingdom. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Keith Brooks, and today the letter Q stands for the quillback fish, also known as the fanciest fin you'll see all day. Also, let me make a little side note right here. I've been signing P and Q the wrong way. I've done a couple P videos now. P is that, Q is that. I've been doing the opposite. Fuck me, I'm so sorry. Excuse me, my apologies. The quillback fish, also known as the quillback carp sucker, is a deep-bodied fish widely distributed across North America. From Saskatchewan all the way down the Mississippi, this fish loves clear water, whereas a lot of carps and suckerfish will often find themselves in the murkiest of water. This guy likes his water a little bit cleaner than that. Very similar in body to a carp, but the distinguishing difference is the quillbacks don't have barbels on their mouth, which are like the little whiskers that we talked about when we talked about the pleco fish. They have a deeply forked caudal fin, and they get their name from the longest of their dorsal fins. See how like fancy it looks? It looks like they would swim faster than any other creature on Earth, because that motherfucker looks like aerodynamic. Like, they look like a Batman Forever Batmobile is what they look like. Generally, they're about 15 to 20 inches long, weighing anywhere from 1 to 4 pounds, though they have reportedly gotten up to 27 inches and weighed 10 pounds. Because of the compactness of their body, if you look at them from the side, they look like they're almost flat. They inhabit fresh water and are omnivores. They eat a lot of insects, they eat a lot of algae, they eat a lot of plants, any sort of detritus they can find at the bottom of the water source. When reproducing, the female of the species will find a patch of ground upstream from where they actually reside, then coating the ground of the stream with roughly 15,000 to 60,000 eggs. The animal is polygandrous, meaning, again, they have multiple partners to mate. So every male will have multiple females, and every female will have multiple males. This is a long-living fish, generally living at least 10 years, but with reported cases of these guys living over 50 years. They are silver in their color with white underbellies and normally dark yellowish or brownish underfins, but they have something called a lateral line, with the quillback having at least 37 scales on its lateral line. What this is a hypersensitive organ that fish possess that allows them to feel changes in water pressure and alterations in the current and the flow of the water itself. It's almost like spidey sense. It's fishy sense, but fishy sense doesn't sound as marketable. They tend to like clean, temperate, slow-moving water. That seems to be their ideal spot of moving because the schools are nice there. That's a fish joke. And they're a fish that's not actually highly susceptible to fishermen's tricks, meaning a lot of typical fishing techniques don't actually fool these guys, but that's mainly because of how they actually feed. The quillback feeds in schools, so a swarm of these fish will all get together and they will almost vacuum clean the floor or the riverbed in which they live. So all of them moving in unison across and just sucking up whatever they get out of the rocks and the dirt and all that stuff. They generally reproduce once a year, but that breeding season depends on the climate of the year itself. They like warmer waters because cold water just causes some shrinkage. So sometimes that spawning season is spring, sometimes summer, just depending on what the temperature is in their area. Because again, they have a massive amount of area they cover, from Saskatchewan all the way to Florida. They have a big area, but not big numbers. Some areas are plentiful in the fish, while other areas find the fish being on the verge of extinction within that specific region. Not really used in North America as a culinary item. The vast majority of the problems leading to this guy dwindling in numbers is strictly pollution of water. Look, I know I sound like a kid who watched too much Captain Planet, but that's because I fucking did. We like to think that that whole idea of dumping waste into streams and lakes that are beautiful and serene is an element of fiction or something that is deeply regulated, but the sad truth is it's not. Tons of different industries have been given the green light to just dump whatever the fuck they want wherever the fuck they want to. And the inside politics of why this is allowed to happen, or why some companies are void of EPA inspections, is just, it's mind-boggling and too much to cover in one episode about the quillback. They're an important part of the ecosystem for wherever they live because, again, they prefer clean water and they help keep it clean. Which not only allows more animals to thrive, but also humans that use that for fishing sources. Look, not to sound too much like the bleeding liberal I actually am, but I think our own wastefulness will eventually come back to bite us in the ass, but unfortunately, before it does that, it harms innocent creatures like this guy first. Look how fucking cool he looks. He's like, I wish I had a ninja star like quillback, because that's what he's just so fancy. You know what I mean? Like, I feel in 1994 they should have made a Sega game about him. Like, and he's the fastest swimmer in this clear water. You gotta get out of the murky water and stop all the polluters. Like, that would have been a dope-ass game. Quentin Quillback. That's what his name should have been. That would have been fucking great. That's $1 million idea, right? I just think they're so pretty. I mean, I think all animals are pretty, but you know what I mean. Thanks for tuning in. Day 20 of 100 Days of the Animal Kingdom. Bye, everybody.